Welcome to ProBlogacy, your inside source for all things Prologue WoW, specifically revolving around the development of the Legacy project. I'm your host, Vero, and I wanted to thank you for tuning into not necessarily our premiere episode, even though this is the first episode. I know that sounds kind of weird, but the official premiere is going to be right before the release of what Prologue is tentatively calling Sandbox 3.0. So this is going to be more of an episode 0 per se than a premiere episode 1 sort of deal going on. Our goal here is to provide you, the player, with all the information you could need about the ongoing development of Prologue, both the legacy phase and any other side projects that are happening, to give you insights into the community, what's happening on the forums, what's happening in-game, big roleplay events, big changes, anything that's going to be of interest, we are going to try and cover. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, etc., you can go ahead and leave those down in the comments section below, or you can feel free to send me a private message at prologue-wow.com. My username there is Vero, V-E-R-O. I'll also have a regularly updated blog there with anything involving ProBlogacy and any other projects I'm working on at the time. You can also follow us via the Facebook page for Prologue or the Twitter account for Prologue. All information on those are down below in the video information section. With that all being said, you kind of know what we're doing, what we're going for here. We're going to start things off in this episode 0 with a very special interview. We managed to get a lot of questions from you all in the community about what you wanted to know about ongoing development for Legacy and the Sandbox. And we compiled the majority of those questions and managed to get the project leader for Prologue Legacy, FireFighter, to sit down in an interview setting and answer those to the best of his abilities. So without further ado, the one, the only, the man himself, FireFighter. What's going on, FireFighter?
Not a whole lot. I'm happy to be here today to do this interview and hopefully answer some questions that people have. I will say at the beginning, though, because I do like to talk as much as I like to type, that there is a disclaimer that a lot of the ideas that I will be discussing are still in development and have not been hard-coded, so they might not necessarily make it through to the end product in Legacy. So there's my disclaimer. You can change it to a color, maybe purple, maybe teal, one of the two. I don't know.
Fair enough. I was about to hold you to every single thing you said going forward, so I'm glad you got that out there.
That was a worry of mine because, situations change and Legacy isn't necessarily what it's going to be in a month as to what it is today or what it was last week. So we just keep developing and hope for the best product in the end.
Love it. That's perfect. All right, so let's get to some of those questions that you had mentioned. We had a bunch of questions come in on the forums, a bunch of really good questions, a bunch of silly questions. I'm gonna skip over some of the silly questions for right now, but I may get to them a little bit later, just because. First off, we have some really good questions on the setting of Legacy and where Prologue is going in that direction. I know in the last phase there was some zones that were locked off, and the question was, do we have any specific plans for locking off zones in Legacy?
To start Prologue Legacy, and I had touched base a few times on the forums in some discussion threads, we do plan on having Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms and Northrend all open and all accessible. Now, there is some worry about whether or not that spreads the player base too thin, or how hubs are going to be established, or any number of things. But I really think that our initial returns so far, we're going to see hopefully the population explosion continued that we had experienced during the last phase and through 1.3. And a lot of people are thinking, well, the world is just too big. And, we did do a lot of brainstorming and work on this during the original development cycle. And it is a large world. None of it will be blocked to start, but that's not necessarily going to say that it won't become blocked if players don't use it. That's about all I'm going to say.
Fair enough. I could expand on that, but you already said that's all you're going to say, so we'll leave it at that for now. With that being said, if we're going to have Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms and Northrend all open, all available, what time frame is the storyline of Legacy going to be taking place? Is it going to be vanilla or Burning Crusade, around Wrath of the Lich King, maybe something after, before? Northrend doesn't necessarily close off any of those time frames. So what are we looking at here for era, as it were?
Well, we've done vanilla restarts a few times. We did Cult Hatreds and we did Old Hatreds, and now we're doing the Sandbox 3.0, which we'll have to come up with a better name than Sandbox 3.0 for record-keeping purposes, because that's a long name. But what we're looking at is actually a post-Wrath of the Lich King era, but pre-Cataclysm.
Okay.
So we don't have the uprising of the elementals yet, but we could go down that road depending on where the players take it. So if you envision the world where Northrend has been conquered and the armies are returning home to their farms and their towns, that is sort of where Legacy will pick up. At least that's the plan right now.
Very cool. That's something Prologue hasn't done before, right?
No, we've done lots of vanilla restarts, but we've never really done a post Lich King, which is where we're going with it. Or at least that's our early concept models are that, we want to do something different that we haven't already done. And we have done pretty much everything to date now. So we want to build a world that reflects, going beyond everything we've already done.
Got it. I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot of RP potential there. You had mentioned doing a lot of vanilla restarts. Mark of the Gods was a huge, huge undertaking in the way of lore development.
315 days worth of development. Yes.
It was intense. I read every single word of every single lore page on the website at the time. For Legacy, though, since we're going in the direction of post-Wrath of the Lich King, Arthas is dead, but the elementals aren't doing their thing yet, and Deathwing is not in the picture as we start Legacy. What can we expect in terms of lore development for Legacy at launch? Are we going to be sticking purely to Blizzard's lore at that point? Are we going with that point and then branching into a completely custom setting? Or are we looking at a mix of it?
Well, what we have planned was a lot like what we had planned for the relaunch in 1.3. We're going to pick our exact starting date, our day, month, year, whatever's going to be in the lore. And everything prior to that will be considered canonized.
Got it.
That will make sense up until that point. But as soon as the doors open for Legacy, the future of the world will depend on the player's actions. We do have some larger worldwide arcing storylines that could lead up to a Cataclysm world, or they could not lead up to a Cataclysm world. And it will all depend on how the players interact with that. And that was a lot of the storytelling features we were going to introduce in 1.4, was to not so much cater to the players in terms of showing up for every single one of their events, but to have events, and it's up to the players to show up to them and influence the outcome. And if they don't show up to them, then the outcome will be whatever the outcome will be. And if they show up, then the outcome will change. And that's where the dynamic world will start. And I believe that Cataclysm, according to Blizzard's lore, actually started 5 years after the campaign in Northrend. So we've got a lot of time in there to work with before, quote-unquote, Cataclysm happens, if it even happens. It all depends on where the players drive the storyline.
So it's fair to say that the quote-unquote lore characters of Blizzard did in those 5 years, it's up in the air now. We could be looking at completely different actions from the lore characters, and we won't know until we get in and start playing whatever storyline is being focused on by the storyteller team and the admins and whatnot at the time. That's where we're going to go, and it may be what we know, it may be something completely different, right?
That is correct. We do have some minor storylines planned that, depending on the outcome of those storylines, will also affect the major storylines. So it all depends on where the players really want to drive with it, what their ambitions are. I mean, if they want to carve out their own kingdom, they can certainly do that. If they want to rebuild one of the devastated kingdoms in the north after the Second War, they can. If they want to colonize Northrend, they can certainly do that. But the world will be happening around them. So however they interact with that world is going to shape where the story goes.
A lot of talk on the forums about economy and professions and player-driven progression. Because with roleplay, shiny pretty gear is very important, but we can't go in and get it just by banging our heads against a raid boss week in and week out. So how are we going to progress to get that shiny pretty gear is a topic of very, very hot debate and some very, very good questions. First off, like in previous phases, will the economy be based off of coins or tokens or a similar source?
Gold is what makes the world go round, and we will have what we hope to see, the return of gold coins. But as players have requested, gold coins are fairly expensive. They need a lesser denomination to gold for buying things. You wouldn't buy a bowl of soup at an inn for 1 gold coin. You'd probably spend 2 silver coin on that. So we hope to bring back silver coins and gold coins in their own denominations, of course, to facilitate the spending of money. I mean, people don't want to drop a gold coin on a Griffin Heart item, but they would drop 10 silver on it without even thinking. I know I did. I had a backpack full of amazing things that people had created. So gold will be reserved for the higher end purchases, and silver will be your day-to-day pocket money. We ruled out copper just because it was a third tier of coinage that we just felt was going to be devalued anyways, much like the penny. It hardly gets used. But, you would use a quarter or a 50-cent piece on a daily basis.
But not necessarily the open bracket coin, closed bracket. Yes, there's going to be currency denominations happening, but it may not be exactly what we're used to, right?
Yes, it'll. I believe the Phase C system had silver coins and gold coins, where it was X amount of silver coins equal to gold coin, and all of your major purchases like buildings and mounts and epic quality gear, for lack of a better term, were gold coin purchases, and all your day-to-day purchases were silver coin purchases. It just helps the money circulate better when you can part with it easier, when you have more of it.
On that note of it being easier to part with the coins when you've got more, they circulate a little bit easier. It stimulates said economy by making it so that the coinage gets out there, the currency gets out there. How exactly are you planning on having the economy working? How's it going to work?
Well, the economy is a huge subject because if done poorly, it will reflect in almost every aspect of role playing on the server. And a lot of people don't realize how much professions and the economy plays into role playing, as it does the economy plays into everyday life. So it's something we've really got to sit down and look at. I am personally not a big fan of coins just poofing into people's pockets every 30 minutes for no reason whatsoever. I don't mind weekly payouts per se, as a personal opinion. If you are a soldier or a chef or whatever and you get a weekly stipend from somewhere, that has more of a IC value than simply sitting at a campfire for 2 hours and all of a sudden you have 2 gold coins in your pocket for no reason. But for the economy, it's really got to be a balance. We need to find a way to inject the money into the economy so that the players will spend it, and the more they spend, the more the economy will move. And I think one of the things Prologue has never done was to embrace crafting and gathering professions, much like in retail. So we've always had things like a blacksmith as a profession. So you pay your 15 silver coins to your blacksmith to get a new sword. But that's as far as the money transfer goes. Where does that blacksmith had to get that iron from somewhere? So maybe we'll look at bringing in the mining profession. So now that gold for that sword has to change hands 3 or 4 times to stimulate everybody's pockets rather than just going into one big pool and then out of the game as the sword gets created.
So we're looking at a far more realistic representation of an economy than we may have ever seen before on Prologue.
That's the hope. I think we were going down the right path in other phases, the last phase included, where we had circulation and money and gold sinks. For Legacy, we'll have silver sinks. The economy is about spending the money, not hoarding it or sitting AFK while you hoard it, so you can get to that. You can save 100 coins for that new mount. Whereas if you spend 4 hours doing that, you might be able to make 100 coins in an hour if you're out there aggressively working at it. I know that goes against the mantra of taking the grind out of role-playing, but at some point, the grind does support role-playing because it gets people moving, gets people out in the world, it gets money circulating.
I love it. To the victor go the spoils, and in order to be the victor, you got to do something for it, right?
That is correct.
All right, so we've seen mentioned possibility of like chef and hunter. What kind of other professions aside from the chef and the hunter are being planned right now?
Well, again, this is all preliminary concept work, but every action there's a reaction. And for every manufacturing or crafting profession, there really should be some kind of gathering profession. So, for a chef, you would need a hunter to go out and get the meat to cook. It makes sense for a blacksmith to need iron from a miner, or the return of something like the Phase C architect system or architect profession would need a lumberjack to go out and harvest the wood in order to feed the lumberjack his planks for building. We've gone over a number of concepts such as the returning of the doctor profession or a soldier profession or a mercenary profession, with different perks for those types of role players. Not everybody wants to be a blacksmith. Maybe somebody wants to be a soldier and get different things that are soldier related. So, we've got a lot on the table, but we want to tie it all together so there isn't just professions for profession's sake. So there's a reason, a progression between the professions, and so they have to codepend on each other.
On that, then, you had mentioned some of the non-manufacturing type professions like the soldier, and some of the things that you had done in Phase C, like the skill trees. Are we looking at a possible comeback of those or something similar there?
I would definitely say yes, because that is how progression will work. They won't be based the same. We want to try and balance them out a little better so that each profession has the same number of tiers and the same perks at different levels, or at the same level. So, if you're second tier for a blacksmith, maybe you get all of your blacksmithing role-playing items, like your anvil and your forge and everything together, whereas a doctor at level 2 would get all of his doctor-related role-playing items, like a bed and the IV and alchemy rack and things like that, so that we can give those tools to the players earlier and then have them work through the bulk of it, such as going through, again, if you're a blacksmith, your green and your blue and your purple item requests. So yes, there will be a return of the Phase C style skill trees. That's my hope, at least, so that players can progress their profession from a starting out character through to a grandmaster, if you will, and be able to achieve bigger and better things.
All right, Firefighter, I appreciate your answers so far. We've still got a lot of questions to cover. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, we're going to go ahead and break things off here for now, and we'll come back at a little bit later time to touch on the rest of these.
Certainly, it's been a great experience so far, and I'm looking forward to all of the questions you have in part 2.
Excellent. All right, we'll talk soon. And there you have it, the first half of the interview with FireFighter. We'll be releasing the second half of the interview within the next couple of days, so keep an eye out on the forums, the Facebook page, and the Twitter account. We'll be announcing when that second half will be released. In the meantime, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode 0, as it were, of ProBlogacy. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day, and of course, safe journeys.